Welcome to Spectrum Sundays. I am Francesca D'Alessandro, a current master's student at University of Buffalo studying speech-language pathology. Additionally, I am your Miss Thousand Islands of New York State, serving my community through AAA Appreciation and Awareness for Autism.
And I am Megan Sinisi, a Master of Health Science candidate studying to practice as a pediatric speech-language pathologist. I am also Miss Central Pennsylvania and the founder of a nonprofit organization for autism titled From a New Perspective.
Everyone deserves to feel accepted and included in every space they walk in. Our series aims to inspire you to advocate for yourself and on behalf of your loved ones. And we are so grateful that you're here with us today.
Kayla Monville is a mother of two beautiful and perfect children with autism. She received her master's degree in special education from Saginaw Valley State University and has been an educator for 10 years in both general education and special education classrooms. She is currently teaching education fundamentals to future educators at a career and technical school. The love for her children and her diverse educational background has driven Kayla to provide a book that can relate to a broad range of families. Kayla hopes that families, educators, and professionals working with young children can use her book titled Rock With Me as a learning tool to promote acceptance and autism awareness, as well as to celebrate the very things that we love so much about our children and students. So Kayla, thank you so much for being with us today. We're really excited to learn about your children, your experience as an educator and as a parent. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Sure, of course. So could you start by giving us a quick overview of your education and your experiences with autism spectrum disorder so far?
Yeah, so I have a bachelor's degree in special education and then also a master's degree in special education. I was an educator in special education classroom for 7 or 8 years, and this is my 10th year teaching. Now I teach future teachers, so I get to inspire those that want to go into education or some form of a career of education. And when I was in special education, I was able to work with general ed teachers and help them create more of an inclusive classroom. I also was I was advisor for a peer-to-peer program. So it was students helping students of neurotypical students, working with students with disabilities. I also am a mother to children on the autism spectrum.
That's so beautiful. And it sounds like your life had kind of prepared you for a role as this one. And it's so good to hear that the special education, you're able to pass that on to a new generation of educators. I went to Syracuse University and we also had a peer-to-peer
Oh,
program
great.
at the
Yes.
university. So I know exactly how impactful something like that can be. And it's wonderful to
Mhm.
hear that you were involved in that as well.
Yes, that's great.
Yeah, we've mentioned on our show too before how some of those mentorship programs, especially at such a young age, really, like Megan said, impacts on a deeper level.
Mhm.
But getting more into your personal life with your family and children, could you tell us a little bit more about your experiences with your own family?
Yeah, so I guess I'm a mom of two children with autism. My children are pretty young still, 7 and 5. They just turned 7 and 5, and they're in the public schools. They started in the center-based program and they moved to full inclusion school, public school. So my son's in first grade and my daughter's in preschool. So they are really active. My son's getting ready to start baseball. My daughter, and we'll see how that looks with, being in a COVID year and the restrictions that we have. He did baseball a couple of years ago and really missed it last year. So that's been something he's been gravitating towards. So hopefully with these COVID restrictions starting to lighten up a little bit and we're getting to a safer place, my daughter could maybe do something like gymnastics. She's really into sensory integration. She loves that hard impact and she has really been flipping around in the house. So I'm hoping to get her involved in something like that.
That is probably going to be a great outlet for her. And
Yes.
I'm really excited to see what that journey looks like for her in the future.
Yes.
Yes, and I hope that everything goes smoothly in the COVID restrictions. It seems like things
Mhm.
are getting better. So
Mhm.
hopefully, there's a light at the end of the tunnel with all of this. But we wanted to ask a little bit about specifically what inspired you to pursue a degree in special education. We know that it's a field that can be intimidating to some. So what was
Mhm.
it that really attracted you to the profession?
It's actually an interesting story. So the level I teach is, it's like a teacher training program. And that's what it was called when I was back in high school, my junior year. So I actually work with my once mentor. So she is the second year teacher and I'm the first year teacher. So when I was in high school, I took the teacher training program and I was placed in the kindergarten classroom. And there I fell in love with the students with disabilities. Like I wanted to job shadow in the special ed room. I wanted to, anytime I got to teach a lesson, I wanted to make accommodations and be inclusive. And I had the greatest mentor teacher. And she had 7 students with disabilities and 7 students that were English language learners. So I had the ultimate experience. And she was the most patient, kind teacher. And she really showed me like those best practices to do to make my classroom inclusive. And that's where it started for me. I knew then in high school, I wanted to be a special education teacher. So now I'm actually teaching the program I once was inspired to go into the field. So it's come full circle. It's my dream job.
It sounds like you picked the right path because some of those strategies and those techniques and the passion seems like it was inherent for you. It just came naturally, which is an indicator that you're a really strong special educator. And I'm sure your students love you.
Thanks. Yeah. And with that, I get that question all the time. Were you a special ed teacher before you had children, or did they inspire you to become a special ed teacher? I was a special ed teacher before I had children, but I would say having my children has made me become a better teacher in general, being more patient. I understand the process now from both sides as a parent and as an educator, where before it was just as an educator. And then when I had to sit in IEP meetings as a parent, it was just completely different. And I could see how intimidating that it could be and how they would use acronyms that maybe other parents would not understand. And maybe they were just doing it because they knew I understood. But I thought, do I do that? And do I just play off my, the strengths of my students? Because that's really where I wanted to be as an educator. I didn't want to look at the data and just say, here's where we are, and all that negative talk about their disability. They've heard it. The parents have heard it 100 times. They know where their child is. They know their child better than anybody. They don't need a professional like me, especially when I was taught high school, get to high school saying, once again, yeah, your child is behind. They wanted to hear solutions, and they wanted to hear how inclusive and accepted they were and how they were building off of all of their strengths to be this great person. So having my children has made me be a better educator.
That was so beautifully said. And I'm really glad that you shared that with our audience, because I'm learning that currently as a speech language pathologist sitting in those meetings, I can see what you are talking about firsthand. And it's really great that you're able to reflect on that and build on it to improve for the students that you serve in those families. But since we're already kind of in that mode of storytelling, could you share maybe some of your fondest memories or stories as a special educator?
So I have so many. I could probably tell you all day, but the best part of being a special education teacher at the school district that I worked at in the high school setting is I received those students as freshmen. And then they stayed with me for 4 years. So they would be with me every single day. So I ran a resource room and I also did push in, but they would be with me at least. I saw them every single day for an hour, and then for 4 years. So when they walked across that stage of graduation, that was like the best thing. And just how we became a little family. The students in the classroom, I have a caseload of 20 to 25 students, and that we see each other every day. They became a family. They started teaching each other. They started, using the language that I was teaching them to use about advocating for themselves and not using their disability as a crutch, but building off their strengths and how to go to the classroom and, be able to advocate that I need, to sit up front. I need to have visuals. I need to take ownership of my learning and help my teacher know what's best for me so that I can be successful and access the curriculum like everybody else. So it was just those moments of the light bulb moments that all the teachers say, that they just love when they see their students get it. I got to see that all the time, especially coming in as freshmen and being so vulnerable and so scared and nervous about what graduation would look like. But the best moments were the transition planning. And I know for some special educators, they're like, the transition planning. So difficult, if that's the worst part of the IEP. It was my favorite because we really got to talk about the whole student. What do you want to do and how are we going to get you there? So if you want to be this, what steps do we need to take to do that? And I got to take them on field trips. Sometimes we would go and look at getting them an ID if they didn't have a driver's license yet, filling out those job applications. When they would get a job after they fill out the application, we practiced for the interview, they get a job and they came back. Those were the best moments, just seeing the IEP come to life.
Yes, I love to hear that. And I was thinking about when you said they follow with you for all 4 years of high school,
Mhm.
how hard it was for me each year to restart at the beginning of a new school year with all different classroom teachers,
Yeah.
all different people in my classrooms. So for these individuals that do thrive on consistency and a set schedule, I can only see how much that helped them progress throughout those formative years of high school. And high school's hard.
High school's hard. Yeah, high school's hard.
And not all students are nice. So to have
Mhm.
a community of students and teachers that you know are there to empower you and to help you grow, I'm sure that made a world of difference from that for them. And that transition piece, that's completely motivated by the family and the students' wants and needs. So I can only
Mhm.
imagine how fulfilling that is for a special education teacher that has followed them for so long to see their hopes and their dreams really come to fruition in that transition into adulthood.
Yeah.
That is beautiful. I love hearing that. You mentioned earlier about being a special education teacher before you became a parent of children with special needs.
Mhm.
So, could you talk us through what that diagnostic process looked like for your children with autism and maybe some of the high and low points or things that you wish could have gone differently or, what was that like for you and your family?
Well, yeah. So there's a difference between the medical diagnosis and then the academic diagnosis. My children received their medical diagnosis kind of parallel with their academic diagnosis. So we knew that we saw the signs. We knew that we needed to go get our child evaluated. So we were working with early on services and they were coming to the home. So I had the special ed teacher coming to the home. And I get this question too, like, why did you have a special ed teacher coming to home when you were a special ed teacher? I'm also his and her mother. And I also work full time. And this was another perspective, another professional, how blessed that I am to have that, that value in my house and to work with my child and somebody else. And then I can be mom and then work with these professionals on building a support system for my children. So when they were doing that and going through that diagnosis process, they were looking at autism, but at first it was just early childhood developmentally delayed until we went and got a medical diagnosis to see. So we went to U of M for both of our diagnoses for both children, and they were wonderful. They're great. There was a long wait list, so that's something parents are shocked when they call to schedule that evaluation, and they're like, "Oh, we're 6 months out." Like 6 months out, so that means 6 months of not receiving any outside services if they don't have that diagnosis. So I called every day, and finally I got a cancellation appointment, and they're like, "Can you be here tomorrow at this time?" Like, we'll make it work. So it's almost a 2-hour drive. We made it up there and it's a long day. And you're in a room almost for 4, 5, 6 hours. I couldn't even tell you how long it was. It felt like a blur. And you'll have one of the specialists, like a neurologist or speech pathologist, and they'll come to the room and they'll evaluate your child for 45 minutes to an hour, and then they'll leave and you have like a 20-minute break. Well, you can leave the room for like that 20-minute break, but those transitions back and forth into the room are really tough. So we just stayed in the room, and then my husband would run down and get snacks or something if we needed it, and then come back. So then they would get together and talk about what they saw, and then they'd come back, a different professional would come back and they do the same thing. And you do this, through 3 or 4 or 5 professionals, and then they would talk together and then they would have a decision for you. We do recommend that your child has autism spectrum or you're on the autism spectrum, and here are some services, and they'd hand us a pamphlet. And with my son, it was just all new. With our daughter, we're like, all right, and the next one's going to come in and we're going to talk about them and we're going to say the same things. So we knew what to expect, but it's a long day. It's really hard on the child. It's really hard on the parents. It's hard on the professionals, I can imagine too. But us as parents, we felt like, our child sitting there, we're talking about them as if they're not there almost, because, I can't just step out of the room while he's in there and we talk about him. But we're talking about them, and then the, professionals, they need to know what the delays are. What makes your child different? What signs are you seeing? Do you have any videos to show us? And with my daughter, we were much more prepared. So we're showing them videos of her flapping. We're showing videos of us calling her name and she's not responding. We're showing videos of her in social settings. So that made it easier and a little quicker for them to make those decisions, because they're just seeing that child in the moment. They don't get to see the whole span of what it looks like, out in the community or at home. So when they give you that recommendation, if they think your child has autism, they give you the pamphlet and it has resources available in your area. Well, unfortunately, in my area, there's not many resources. I mean, enough where even the professionals were like, well, if you're willing to drive or move, like there might be some. And it's like, that's putting me in a situation where we have to pick up our life, my support system, my whole family's here to get services. So I'm leaving supports. Like it's almost, and my husband and I have gone back and forth. Do we leave? Do we move? What do we do? And what we do know is we work with our school as much as we can on getting the services that we can for our children. And I have a tight group of, other parents in our area that work together. But this is really why I wrote Rock With Me, Autism Inspired, I Love You book. I just felt like when we were leaving that diagnosis process, we just felt sad. And it wasn't something to be sad about, it was something to be celebrating about. But we felt sad that we just spent all that time talking about our child's delays or in a negative light, saying our child does this instead of, I love when my child flaps. So when my daughter was going through the process, we made sure we said it in that way, but that they knew they weren't doing it ill intention. They have to know what makes them different so that they can decide. But if they would have just handed me something like Rock With Me, Autism Inspired, I Love You book, and said, I know those were really tough conversations. You just shared a lot of personal information and things that, made your child sound different. But those are the same things we love about your child also and want to celebrate, and gave me this book, I'd have been like, okay, that was worth it. Or that you did recognize how awesome my child is, and you are celebrating this, not mourning this. So I felt like, and they weren't mourning, they, as professionals, but as a parent, you feel like that because you walk out, here's some service. Now you need to go do something with your child to make them better, to give them, hope or help. And you're like, like what's so wrong with them? They're so beautiful. They're so perfect. But they do need some supports and services, and that's our job as a parent then to go find them. But if there's none in your area, it's really tough.
I think there's quite a few really good takeaways in that story you just shared with us. But first of all, I appreciate you just being very open and transparent about that process, because I think that is something a lot of parents go through. And even with the pandemic, it's made things a lot more challenging. And I know that's something that we talk about where I work, is how important early intervention is. Mm-hmm. And even so with online learning, how there should be more push for early intervention. And luckily you had that special education background where you could pick up on some things, but a lot of parents who don't have that same background might not recognize there might be some delays with their children, or that their children might need some additional support. So it's really great to hear that you are such a strong advocate for your children, because they will pick up on that and start advocating for themselves, which I'm really excited to learn a little bit more about later. But if we could just kind of shift gears a little bit into your book, Rock With Me, what was the reaction and support from the autism community like after you had released that?
It has been so great. It's been so welcoming and heartwarming. And I've had so many parents reach out and say, thank you so much for writing this. This is exactly what my heart needed. Educators buying it for each other, for their classrooms. And, a lot of occupational therapists and speech pathologists is to have, outside services to have in their offices to support parents, and just letting them know so that they see that book and they say, oh, like, thank you, thank you for recognizing us and recognizing that it is a celebration of us. So, and it's just celebrating our differences, because there is a lot of, not meaning to or intentionally, but there is a lot of talk that could make you feel down when you're talking about autism in general, or even disabilities in